Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name, again, is Peter Rising. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I'll be talking to you this morning about SharePoint Syntex and Teams made for compliance. So you might be wondering why we're talking about Syntex and Teams when this is the security and compliance track specifically, but there's a big tie-in from Syntex to compliance, and that is in the form of retention labels, and we will see that as we go through this presentation. So let's get started. So a little bit about me to begin with. We'll keep it brief. As I said, my name is Peter Rising, MVP. You can reach me all around social media, on Twitter at M365Rising, LinkedIn at Peter Rising. I'm also to be found in the Microsoft tech community, where I like to help where I can. And I'm the author of a couple of books on the Microsoft 365 Security Administration Exam Guide, and co-author of MS Teams MS 700 Exam Guide. So let's get into SharePoint Syntex. Before we get into this, actually, one thing, the slides are going to be quite minimal. This is going to be mainly demo, so we're not going to give you too much death by PowerPoint in this presentation. But let's have a little quick look at what exactly is SharePoint Syntex. And in Microsoft's own words, Syntex is an Office 365 service that helps organizations to use advanced AI and machine teaching to amplify human experiences, automate content processing, and transform content into knowledge. Importantly, and you will see this in a moment when we get into demo, licenses are required for users who need to use Syntex within the Microsoft 365 environment. So SharePoint Syntex consists of models, and there are two models at the time of this presentation, and these are document understanding and forms processing. And there are slight differences between the two models, but they both do essentially similar things. So document understanding uses a dedicated SharePoint site, which is called a content center, and you create this content center when you're setting up Syntex, and we'll see this in a moment in demo. And this content center is used to apply extracted knowledge, which you can then apply to multiple document libraries in the form of columns to see the information that you want. Now, the compliance bit that comes into both models is that with document understanding and forms processing, you can apply retention labels to your content as part of the process. So this is where the compliance piece comes in. And awesome news, sensitivity labels is on the roadmap as well. So we can expect a lot of good stuff to come with SharePoint Syntex models in terms of compliance as the journey continues. So forms processing, a little bit different. It uses AI Builder. Credits are needed for that, so you're going to have to spend a bit of money on that. And this extracts knowledge to a single document library. So you set this up from a single document library, and then you use AI Builder and Power Apps and flows to build that out. It can also apply retention labels to the content. And again, sensitivity labels are coming soon. For the purposes of this demonstration, when we get into it, we're going to focus on document understanding models, because that's the one that I think certainly in the early life of SharePoint Syntex will probably get the most adoption, purely because of the cost. AI Builder is not cheap, but we will focus on document understanding for this one. And I do have some guidance on forms processing that I can point you to in the form of some articles that I have written if you're interested in that. So which model do you want or need to use if you're adopting SharePoint Syntex? So document understanding, what's that used for? It's going to be used for semi-structured file formats. An example of that would be Office documents where there are differences in layout, but still similar information needs to be extracted. So for the example that I'm going to be showing you this morning, we're going to be using a statement of works, and they can be very, very different documents. And in those statement of works, we're going to look to extract some dates from those documents and put those into SharePoint columns, and then ultimately into Teams, importantly, which is the real cool bit. Forms processing. This is used for, again, semi-structured file formats, for example, PDFs, for forms content. And this is more for things like invoices or purchase orders, where the layout and formatting is similar and more consistent. So invoices, purchase orders, that sort of thing. But essentially, the same sort of thing. So what does this have to do with Teams then? Well, let's find out. We're going to go right into the demo, and we're going to switch gears into my demo tenant, which is showing nicely there. That's great. Now, what I have a backup plan here, which Chris will appreciate. Is that I have another tenant ready to show you one that I did earlier in case this one gets sluggish or doesn't do what I want it to do. But let's go on this journey of SharePoint Syntex within a Microsoft 365 tenant. The first thing you need to do is get licensed for it. And if you go into your Microsoft 365 Admin Center at admin.microsoft.com, you'll need to have obviously the appropriate admin permissions to get to here. I'm in as a global administrator here. Do make sure you're using MFA. I'm not, because this is a demo tenant. But then into billing and purchase services, and if you do a search for Syntex, you can see here that you have this option come up here, and this is going to be from $5 in US currency for licenses per month. So if we go into the details, and I've already got a trial of this, you can get a 30-day trial of 300 users, and I've got my trial. So that's step one. Step two, to get going with SharePoint Syntex, make sure that you assign the licenses to your users. So if you go into the active users, I'll find my lovely MOD administrator friend here, and I've already assigned the licenses. Here we go into licenses and apps. And if we filter, no, we don't filter at this point. There we got SharePoint Syntex, but if we go a bit further down into the apps, just make sure if you filter by Syntex that you have got all of these items here ticked. It does tend to do that by default now. Previously, it didn't necessarily do so, but I found the last couple of times that I've done it that the common data servers for SharePoint Syntex and the Syntex SPO type are all ticked. So we're in a good position. We have got our trial licenses and we're ready to start using SharePoint Syntex. So the next thing we need to do to get it going is go and set it up in settings and org settings. And it's under services. And if we scroll down, we will be able to see SharePoint Syntex. So we will go into Syntex right here, and it's loading, and it's still loading. There we go. And we can click on View SharePoint Syntex Setup Details, which takes us to this section here, Automate Content Understanding. So this is what it's going to do. It's going to set up content understanding capabilities within your tenant to allow you to automatically find, classify, and extract info to automate processes and make files easier to find. And you get a good description here of what it's going to do. Users will be able to create AI models to extract metadata, such as the name of people or organizations from files. Other models can recognize different types of documents, images, and scanned forms in SharePoint libraries. We're not going to get too deeply into the weeds of these different things. We want to get to the point where we see how this looks in Teams. So if we click on Get Started, what do I want to do? We're going to configure form processing first. So here are our two document understanding models that we have. We've got form processing, we've got document understanding, and we're going to focus on the document understanding. But for form processing, we set this up at the same time, and we can choose if we want this to apply to all of our SharePoint sites or a selection or none at all. We'll go for all SharePoint sites just here. Now here for document understanding, this is where we have to set up our dedicated SharePoint site, which is a content center. I'm going to call it my Syntex Content Center inventively. Content, not context. You can tell it's early in the day. And yep, that is available. So we'll go next and activate. And it applies the settings, and this should just take a few seconds to be ready. And once we get in, we can start with our document understanding and show you how we set retention labels. Now, why it might be a good idea to quickly show you actually while we wait for that is if we go into the Compliance Center, obviously never been into it on this browser before. Forgot the M. There we go. And let's look at our retention labels and see what which ones we have set up while we wait for that to come into play. So into our catalog, we find retention labels under information governance. So we open that solution, and here are our retention labels. We've got some lovely ones built in here in this demo tenant. The one that I'm going to pick on here is this public one, which is a retention label, which is going to retain content for 5 years, and then it's going to trigger what's called a disposition review at the end of that process. So if we edit that, we can get a little bit of a better view of what that label is going to do. So yeah, this is going to retain items which are labeled with this label for a period of 5 years. And well, in actual fact, this one is going to do nothing at the end of that period. But you have some choices with retention labels, obviously. At the end of that period, you can delete the items automatically. You can trigger a disposition review, so a reviewer can go in and review that content and decide what to do with it, or you can do nothing. But that's the retention label that we're going to pick on here. And you might ask, what's the difference between retention policies and retention labels? This is a question that comes up quite often in my dealings with my customers. Retention policies apply really at the container level of Microsoft 365 to your SharePoint sites, to your Exchange mailboxes, whereas the retention labels, they are applied at the item level, to the file, the individual item level. And they have the ability to run those disposition reviews as well at the end of the process, whereas the retention policies do not have that. Here we go. We couldn't activate SharePoint Syntex, so this is why you have a backup plan. I don't know why it couldn't activate SharePoint Syntex, but what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears, and instead of actually doing it, we'll sort of reverse engineer it and have a look at the other ones. So let me just switch to my other Edge browser, and here's what I made earlier. So another demo tenant, and we'll step to this tab here. We are in our Syntex Content Center here. This is where we would have got to had that activated. And the first thing you need to do when creating a document understanding model is to create a model. So if we go in, I've got one already here, which we can have a look at in a second. But when you create it, you can go in and give the model your name. So we'll call it scopes of work or statements of work. We'll give it a description if you want to, but I'm not going to because I'm lazy. Under the advanced settings, this is where the good stuff is. Now, SharePoint works with content types. And for this, you can create a new content type, or you can use an existing content type. If you select the existing content type option, then you can see some of the options that you have available to you to choose from, some of these built-in ones. Now, one that I created earlier, the other document understanding model already there is scope of work. So we could select that one from here if we wanted to, but I'd create a new one in this case, and it would be named scopes of work as our type. And here is where you select the all-important retention label. You can see we can select other ones if you want to. I'm going to pick on my old friend, the public retention label, and retain the content for 5 years, and go ahead and create that model. So once you're in your model, the first thing you need to do is add some files to it so we can go and train our model. So you do that from here, and what we want to do is add in at least 5 positive examples of the type of file that we want to match from. So I'm going to use statements of work, and I got some examples of statements of work here, which which I can put in. So you can see I've got 7 documents selected here. In fact, I'm going to take that one out because I know that one is a dodgy one. It doesn't tend to work very well. But you are encouraged with SharePoint Syntex when training your models to understand content to have a negative example in there as well, something that is not going to contain the sort of information that you are looking to extract and put into SharePoint columns. So this document here, marketing handover, is a random wildcard document there, which is not going to contain the information that I want to extract. And you can see here, once I've added my example files, it unlocks these next 2 tiles in the process. So the next thing we need to do is what's called training our classifier. Now here we go in and we have our documents that we've just uploaded, and we can label them as, are these going to be an example of a scope of work? So the answer in this case is yes, it's definitely going to be an example. It moves to the next one automatically. This one, also a scope of work. Yep, statement of work. So we'll say yes to that. Marketing handover. No, this is not an example. This is our negative example. And you can see it labels these as you go. Next file. This one is, that one is, and that one is. So that's it. And it tells you you've labeled sufficient number of files now. You can move to the training section of the model creation. So here, the next thing you have to do is add in an explanation. Now this tells the model how to identify this type of model and what to extract. So this is an important part to it. You have to, this is a mandatory step. You have to do this bit. So we'll go in and we will create our scope of work. And now type, select phrase list, and this used to be different. They've changed this a little bit since the first time I used it. It used to be phrase lists or patterns. It's now all in this one phrase list. So we'll select that, and here what we're going to do is we're going to copy statement of work, and we're going to put it in to there as what we want to search for. So typically in these example documents that we've got, the content is going to be at the top of the file in these particular examples. So to narrow down the parameters, we're going to search at the beginning of files, and I'll select only exact capitalization, and we will go ahead and now we can go through the files here actually, and you'll see that it's picking up that top area in all of them. And we can go ahead and save and train. So this is the part where it evaluates, and we've got a match. Excellent, that's good. So if you have a mismatch here, it means that you haven't given enough information in the explanation. That bit where I put statement of work in, it won't know how to rationalize that content. So we've got a match there. We do have a mismatch there because that's a negative example. I think that should be all right though. So unable to retrieve extracted text from the document. Okay, we'll just see what happens here. No text found in that file. That's interesting. Okay, but then if you've got matches, we can go ahead and train the model. That mismatch there at the end sort of flummoxed me a bit. That might not work, but we can switch to the one I did earlier just to show that if need be. Okay, so let's have a look. What have we got here? The training correctly predicted as a positive example. Correctly predicted as a positive example. So these are all statements of work. Where is our marketing file? It should be here somewhere. Oh, yeah, it's a certification. Yeah, that's also predicted as a positive example. Incorrectly predicted as a positive. Yeah, so this is where you have to be careful and go back and check what's gone wrong here. For some reason, this has been incorrectly predicted as a positive example. We'll not get too much into the weeds of this because I'm conscious of time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of this actually building it and go through the one that I know actually works. So that's the one we've tried to create there. We'll switch gears and go into this one. And this is the one that I know works. So just to go into that process here we go. We've got our same files, and if we go into the training, we've got our explanation, and it's fully trained. We've got matches there, so that's all good. Excellent, good. Once you've got to that point and it's all matches, and it knows that the examples are correct, positive, yeah, and that's a negative, that's the marketing handover form, you can go and exit the training. Now, you can move to the extractor part. This is an optional step. You don't have to do this, but I don't see why you wouldn't, because you want to extract content from your models. So here you can create an extractor to extract the content you want from the documents. I'll just go in and do another example one just to show you how that works. Create a new column or use an existing column. We'll create a new column here. This is the column name that you're going to see in your SharePoint library and ultimately within Teams. Select the column type. In this case, what I want to do is I want to extract date and time from that content. So we'll go ahead and create that. And then it takes you into here, and what you do is you select the content in here that you want to extract. So labeled examples. So you would go ahead and select that. And yeah, if you're happy with these being the right files, you go into the training, and then you add an explanation, and then you train it. So I'll not get too bogged down in that. I'll go into the one that actually works. So we have created extractors. They're going to extract, in this case, there we go. It's going to extract documents that have dates into columns within SharePoint libraries. So that's all good to go. And if we click on back here, that's all ready. Once you've done everything, once you've classified your trials, your files, once you have got your extractors already with what you want to extract to SharePoint, you're then ready to apply this to your SharePoint library. So if you come to apply the model, you can apply that to a SharePoint document library. Now this is where Teams comes into play, and we'll pause just a little wee bit just there to go into Teams. Now, this is the end result of SharePoint Syntex. Now, what we have is in Teams, we've got our files in our document library, and we've got these columns here. We've got a nice view here, which has showed our content type as scope of works, and it's got a date on there, and it's got the retention label. It's applied our retention label, which is what we wanted it to do. And we've got some confidence scores as well, and all that good stuff. So how did we get to that point? Let's show you how we did that exactly. So what we'll do to duplicate this process is we'll go ahead and create a team. So we'll go ahead and create a brand new team from scratch. We'll just make it a public team, and we'll call it Syntex Example 2. Inventive, I know. Okay, nice work. So we can skip that, and we've got a nice team there. And let's go into our files. We can't get your files. We're working on getting them back. Okay, we'll give that a moment. Okay, let's just give that a refresh. See if it comes back to us. There we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create, well, I'm going to go into SharePoint, because you'll see here in this example, I have document understanding models here as a channel. Now you might think I went in and created that channel from here, and in fact I did. So, and the reason for doing so is you want to get at that within SharePoint, and then apply the document understanding model to that folder or channel. And you can't do that if you create the folder within SharePoint, obviously, because if you create a folder within SharePoint, For a Teams-friendly SharePoint site, it doesn't end up in here. So that's just one of the gotchas to be aware of. So let's go in and we're going to add a channel, and we will call it, again, just like above, we'll call it Doc Understanding Models, and we'll just have it as a standard channel. Okay, and go into our files. And let's go ahead and open this in SharePoint. Okay, so I'm not going to upload any files into this just yet, because I did see that if you do so, it doesn't tend to apply the model, or at least it doesn't do it in a timely fashion or immediately. I don't think it does it at all, if I'm honest, but I'll have to wait a bit longer and see if it does. But once you've applied your document understanding model to your document library, which we will show you in a minute, now that we've got this library ready to go, you then upload the documents, and it will derive the content from the files and label the correct columns. You can see at the moment, because we've not applied the document understanding model that we've created in our Syntex Content Center to this document library, that we have just some standard columns here at the moment in our document library and in our team by the same token. So we've got our team ready, we've got our backend document library ready in SharePoint. Let's go ahead and go back to our Syntex Content Center, and we've got our scope of work model all ready to go. And we want to apply that to a document library. So let's go ahead and do that. And it's been very kind to me here. It's recognized that I've had some recent sites. I want to apply this document understanding model to that new site, Syntex example 2. We're going to put it into documents, advanced settings, just got some library view stuff in there, so not much to choose there. And we can go ahead and add. So we could publish our model. Okay, and it's succeeded. That's good. And as it suggests here, it will run when new files are added, or select any file in the library and then classify or extract. So there's two ways you can do it. You can upload the content, or you can explicitly click on classify and extract. So let's go to the library. So here we go. We can now see that we have got our document understanding models folder or channel that we created in Teams, but we've now got some additional columns in here. We've got content type. Let's go into the actual channel rather. We've not got any files in there at the moment. We've got content type, we've got scoping docs, we've got scope of work, we've got retention label, we've got confidence score, classification, lots more stuff. And you can modify this. You can change views here. You can go back to the standard view if you want to. It's simply created a view for you that you can leverage. Has that translated into Teams? Let's go back and take a look. Let's go and refresh. And yes, it has. It absolutely has. So let's now see the document understanding model in action and see if it actually works and does what we want it to do. So we'll go back and we'll upload some files into our document library. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go and find some files to upload. And if I go into my downloads, what the heck are these? I had these before. Tell you what I will do, bear with me a second. I'll just go ahead and download these ones and then upload them again. Okay, oh yes, they were in the OneDrive. That's where they were. Okay, so let's go back. Upload files. I remember now. So that is the ones we want. There we go. These are our documents, and we are going to upload our statements of work with our rogue marketing document in there. This is just a handover form for one of the books I wrote with Nate. So we'll select all these files, and let's see what happens when we upload these into our document library. Okay, so you can see here, we're analyzing your file. One or more columns will be updated with discovered values. If you click on the Learn More here, you get a link to the document understanding overview on docs.com. I encourage you very, very much to go and look at docs.com. There's a lot of great content there, and you can really learn a lot from these guides and videos. And it can help to get you started. So, but you learn by doing, which is how I learn, certainly. So still analyzing the files. One or more files will be, so let's give that a little refresh, see if anything has been, and yeah, we've got some matches, which is excellent. Excellent stuff. So we can see that these PDFs, which are scope of works, have been correctly identified as a content type of SOW, scope of works. And we've got the date of which that was extracted from the content, which is excellent. Okay, we've got our retention label has applied as well. It's applied our public label, so any content that we have got in this document library now is going to be retained. What does that mean? That means that if a user decides they're going to delete this content, it may, to all intents and purposes, seem like it's deleted to them, but it's going to be retained and be discoverable in tools like Microsoft 365 eDiscovery and Advanced eDiscovery. You can access it through content searches and get that content back. So this is the good thing about retention policies and why you absolutely need to have them in place in your organization. And as an aside on retention policies, very, very important when planning your retention policies and retention labels, retention all round, is be mindful of your organization's internal policies and any industry regulations that you are bound by as an organization in terms of how long you need to retain data. By the same token, think very, very mindfully about over retaining data as well. You don't want to over retain data. That's equally as bad as not retaining enough, because an example of that could be if you've got data that's still being held on your tenant that you shouldn't be retaining. It can lead to all sorts of nasty situations. If you have a legal action, a litigation in place, and you should have deleted that data, if it's still there and discoverable, you're probably going to be obliged to present it when you didn't need to. So things like that. But retention, hugely important, ties into all sorts of other good stuff in Compliance Center, eDiscovery, as I say, which is another favorite topic of mine. But here we go. Let's do another refresh. Just make sure that we have everything labeled that we want to. And yeah, it's picked up everything that we want to. So this was the rogue document in the equation. So this has been identified as a scope of work because it's got that label in there, but it couldn't extract the date from it because there was no date in there. So it's not populated our scoping docs column with the content that we wanted to extract from there, that date. And this is just one example of the content that you could extract into a column. There's other things that you could extract from those documents, all sorts of content. You saw from the document understanding model that you can do date and time, you can do lines of text, you can do all sorts of options. And I encourage you to go and play with it, go and try it yourself. And there's a lot of good articles out there on Syntex as well, on document understanding models and also forms processing. So what does that look like in Teams? Let's take a look in our Teams now. We'll give our Teams a refresh. And there we go. We have got the same view. We have got our document understanding models channel or folder, depending if you're in SharePoint or Teams. And we've got the same content here. We've got the columns all populated and it's recognized. Our content type of scope of work is it's got our extracted dates from the matching documents. It's applied our retention label. We've got a confidence score as well, which is a pretty nice level of accuracy. So this is going to give you an idea of how accurately predicted that is, and that it has applied this model and this retention label. We've got the classification date and then the regular sort of standard columns there as well. You could upload content from here directly from Teams as well, and it would go ahead and do the same in a few moments. It would analyze that content and label it accordingly. And what you can do as well is, if you go back to the SharePoint, I did mention just a wee bit earlier that you can, where is it? I think you probably have to select the file, and you can go ahead and explicitly classify and protect the content. It's just eluding me just now where that option is. I thought it was in the, it's interesting. But you can do that. That's going to bug me now if I can't find that, but we'll not get too hung up on it. But that is our SharePoint Syntex document understanding model, and that is it extracted into a SharePoint document library, but it's also presenting in Microsoft Teams with a channel that we set up within Teams, and we've applied that document understanding model to our library. And it's doing exactly what we wanted to do, which is absolutely fantastic. So let's just now I want to cover just very briefly, just to explain a little bit about the forms processing option as well, while we have a little bit of time left. I can't effectively demonstrate that to you, but I can direct you to an article that I wrote on it on Practical 365 about the process of doing forms processing models. It's a lot more complex to set up, and you have to have AI builder credits. So you have to go in and do things like calculating how many credits you're going to need to stand that up and run that. So there's going to be more cost there. You still need the SharePoint licenses. There are some limitations as well with forms processing models, in that it can only do PDFs and JPEGs and TIFFs, I believe. It can't do Word documents. So there's a lot more potential for the type of content that can be analyzed by document understanding models than there are forms processing at the moment. But were you to try and do forms processing, then you'd need that SharePoint Syntex license again. You need the AI builder stuff set up. And then if that's all set up and working, you could do this from one document library. With the content, the document understanding models, you can apply your model to multiple libraries. The forms processing, you set it up from one library, and it can't be applied to more than that one library. So, and the way you do that is you would go in to the ellipses here from the library, go into Automate, and what you should see under Power Automate is create a forms processing model, but it's not present in this tenant, this demo tenant, because I don't have the AI builder functionality in there to support that. But that just explains a little wee bit about the forms processing alternative. And I'll put in the chat the link to my series on SharePoint Syntex if anyone is interested in taking a look at that. So let's just switch back to the slide deck. So we've concluded our demo. We're just about in good time here, which is good. And I think really we're ready for some Q&A. But before I do that, I must give you this slide here to rate my session and calls to action. Rate the session, please attend more sessions and join our ending keynotes, and do show your love for Teams Nation on Twitter and LinkedIn by using the hashtag Teams Nation and @TeamsNation tags. And that is me. So I will open it up to any questions that you may have.